Coming up on Theater Talk.
The yelling, whatever, yelling, I don't care about that. It was what was underneath, which was a sense of, at this moment, you know, I'm the professional iceberg watcher, and I'm telling the captain of the ship, this is an iceberg. and not only, she's not only the captain of the ship, she's also my co-professional iceberg watcher. And you know, and she basically said, no, I know that you're a professional iceberg watcher, you're mistaken, that isn't an iceberg. And if you mention icebergs again, I'm going to lock you in the brig.
Theater Talk is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation. From New York City, this is Theater Talk. I'm Susan Haskins.
And I'm Michael Riedel of the New York Post. And I want to say a great, heartfelt thank you to our guest. Glen Berger is the co-author with Julie Taymor of a musical you may have heard of called Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark.
Oh, yeah.
Welcome to Theater Talk, Glen. And I just want to say, my career, which is going great guns, is due in large part to your work on Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, what I was able to say about it. I had a gig on Ibis out of it. I got on Smash. Your show made my name in this business, and I am grateful, eternally grateful.
I could see you saw the opportunity and you seized it.
I certainly did.
And Glen, I want to applaud you for coming here today to talk to someone who you called a parasite-carrying, blood-sucking mosquito depositing the larva of elephantiasis causing filarial worms under the skin of our show, Michael Riedel.
Not to put him in a negative light or anything. I meant that in the best sense of the phrase.
If the shoe fits, I mean, I've been called worse, don't worry. Glen Berger is here because he has written an excellent insider's look at all of the trauma and the drama of Spider-Man. It's called Song of Spider-Man, the inside story of the most controversial musical in Broadway history, and I'm delighted that it brings Glen Berger to Theater Talk today.
Well, here we are.
So is this a form of exorcism for you, Glen? I mean, you lived with this show.
That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, absolutely.
It may have almost killed you, and you just had to get it out, or is it your version of the record that you wanted to say? Because you never spoke.
No, I didn't.
You were never quoted anywhere. You never returned phone calls. I remember. But no, you didn't speak during the controversy when we were all reporting on this.
Yeah, yeah, or even during the legal woes afterward. I tried to
with Julie
keep a lid on it. Yeah.
Now, Julie Taymor, the director,
yes,
who you wrote the book with, she took you on as a partner after they had fired Neil Jordan.
That's right. Yeah, years and years
yes.
ago. Yeah.
We'll get to all that in a minute, but I just want.
Well, you know, it was Lord knows. Once opening night came and went, the very last thing I wanted to do was relive it all again. And for a couple months after opening night, you know, it hadn't even occurred to me that I would ever write this thing. I wasn't going to write this thing. And then, yeah, a couple months later, I thought, but it was such a story, and I'm a writer, and it could just disappear down the memory hole forever if I don't write it, because no one else was quite there like I was there. And yeah, so I thought, God, I'm gonna have to actually sit down and spend the next year reliving every day of this.
And had you kept a diary? It seemed like you had kept an amazing journal.
I've kept a journal since 1989, but I was very I was a lapsed journal writer during much of this. There was a note or two, and then email helped me a lot, and especially during this, when I was in rehearsal, I was writing my wife, who, you know, we live upstate, and so, you know, filling her in every day, and then also, and then an early part of the process, all the conversations with Bono and Edge and Julie, and we had a tape recorder there, and so hundreds of hours of tape, and
who has those tapes? Jacob Cole, Michael Cole, he's the producer of the show. Jacob Cole, his son, was making a documentary.
He has beautiful footage. I mean, beautiful footage. I didn't even know this, he had a camera trained on me on the first preview night.
Oh my God.
So you see me leaning in my chair like this, and then later I'm
as the show goes on for like 4 hours or something, it stops and starts. Now, just take us back, though, because one thing that I think comes through in the book, and we've all made fun of Spider-Man for 2 or 3 years now, but nobody sets out to write a bad show.
No.
And there's a sense of excitement and joy and hopefulness when you begin. Can you just give a sense, recreate that for us, those moments with Julie and Bono and the Edge?
It's exasperating reading anything in print because, like the New York Times, which gave it a rather positive review of this book, but, he starts out by saying this was a show conceived in cynicism. And I spent the whole book up to the last page saying the exact opposite. It was conceived in a call it a naive idealism for what this show is going to be. We were going to open hearts and blow minds, and I describe in the book Bono. The first time he meets me, he practically clutches my lapels and says, "This has to be brilliant."
It seems to be conceived in what you say on your level, not to be patronizing, but there's an uber level, aside from Tony Adams, who died, where there does seem to be a certain amount of cynicism.
No, the only cynicism I detect in the beginning is Marvel Comics.
Yes.
That this is a brand to exploit. You don't get cynicism from Bono and the Edge. They don't need it for the money.
No,
they
that's
don't have
right.
to do this.
That's
Julie
right.
Taymor doesn't have to do this.
That's exactly right. They saw it as we all did, as a vehicle for our highest aspirations as artists. The themes were mythic. We weren't thinking of it in terms of the plastic balloons of Spider-Man. We're thinking of it in terms of how these stories have been going on since prehistory. The mythic stories of humans with animal powers and all the rest of it, and even Marvel. I would say, as much as it's a capital B brand, I describe in the book how early on we met with Joe Quesada and played him a cut from the album, and from the demos, and Peter Parker utters the S word, and Joe Quesada says, "Whoa, no, we can't have that." And it wasn't just because of this brand; it was this sense of ever since 1962, we have been working very hard to cultivate this particular character and the world he lives in, and you need to honor that.
Respect the tradition that they had laid down.
Respect the tradition. So it wasn't just a question of not tarnishing the brand. It was more about contributing to this legacy.
Well, who was the guy, though, at Marvel who subsequently left, but when Julie was spinning her Uber plot about Arachne, which was the ultimate undoing of the show, that he said, "Get Arachne out of there," very early on.
That's right.
He was standing this, which was what had to happen, and yet you had to go through years before you could listen to the Marvel guy who said, "That doesn't make any sense, get it out of there." What was his name?
Interesting. Avi Arad. He was.
But before him, there was Neil Jordan. I interviewed Neil Jordan when I found out that he'd originally been on it, and I called him up, and he said, "Yeah, well, I met with them in Ez, I think. Isn't that where they have their fancy villas there in the south of France?" I'm going to get to that in a minute. And he said, "Yeah, she kept going on about this Arachne thing." And I thought, this isn't going to work.
Well, that might be a little spin.
That could. So the interesting thing, one of the things I'd like about this book is that you are, when it begins, the story begins, you're kind of hard up. I mean, you're not pulling down a lot of money.
Well, the fact is, and I can just say it here, I was doing fine. I made the stupidest purchase on a house ever. No, and so I mean, the sense that like, yeah, man, I've got money problems, absolutely. But it wasn't like I wasn't penniless. It just felt like I was penniless.
And I want to compliment you on your play Under the Lintel.
Thank you.
Which brought you into this, which is played all over the world. It's not like you were some hack out of nowhere. You were a very well-known playwright.
And of course, it doesn't get any play in the theater world, but children's television is seen. I mean, my shows were seen by 10 times more people than people had seen Lion King in the first 6 years.
So you're richer than Julie Taymor.
Yeah, it was PBS children's shows.
We know about PBS.
We know about PBS.
So what is it like? Suddenly you're on private planes.
Yeah.
You're staying in Bono and the Edge's
First class.
first class, and you enter the bubble.
Yes, I did enter the bubble.
Were you seduced by it?
I mean, it's a very nice bubble. But, I mean, what I was more seduced by than the, wow, you know, of stardom and all the rest, I was more seduced by Julie and Bono and Edge's, seriously, their artistic commitment. Like, man, they were like cool and happy and more energized and more happy than they are any other time when they're discussing art, you know, when they're being creative. And that kind of juice is always what I'm looking for. And it was gratifying to see, you know, that even at their level where really they could just hang out in Ez and you know, coast, that they get up in the morning. You really feel this. The reason that they are, you know, continue living is to come up with new stuff.
As the servants give them breakfast, they're happily discussing art.
Did you have a sense, though? Did you ever feel, when you began to sense things were not perhaps going the way in the writing process they should?
Right.
Did you ever think you'd be strong enough to challenge these people?
Well, you know, in order to, well, I'll say this. You know, you need to, in order to have that strength, you need to be absolutely confident that you're right. You know, with someone else, you can throw out, no, you're wrong, and with this, it's got to be airtight. You know, you've got to be sure you're right, or else, man, just hold on. You know, and so it didn't. Obviously, it didn't occur to me that I would have to answer that question, you know, until it got to late December 2010, and then it did. The moments came when it's, all right, well, wow, maybe I'll just try a little suggestion here and there and see what you know what comes of it.
How were those suggestions greeted by Julie and Bono and the Edge?
Just great.
Well, there's a point early in the book when Julie, when you first start to talk to Julie, you go to her beautiful house, her apartment, and she takes your face in her hands and she says something like, "Oh, I've never had a partner like you." I mean, that you do describe how she seduces you in this way that you are completely smitten.
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It comes. I kept thinking, where's Elliot? Goldenthal, her boyfriend.
No, well, it's not.
It was very. It's all platonic, and by platonic, I mean on a platonic realm of
where she exists.
Yeah. You know, exactly. No. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, it felt very. You know, I mean, gosh. Yeah. Like that sort of level of demigoddess. You know.
So you were in the tank right there.
I was in the tank, and you know, and what happened was, you know, well, very early on. Very, very early on, I had my own take on what the show should be, and this was when Tony Adams was still alive, and Julie and Tony were thinking, well, I don't know, I don't think so. maybe you can just move along, and nice knowing you. And that's when I realized, you know what, this isn't about me. This isn't my show. The best thing that I can do is really. It's so clear that it's in Julie's brain, and if I can be the one who can help get it out of her and turn it into a dialogue, then that's this. It's not going to be Glen Berger's Spider-Man.
It's like Tom Meehan to Mel Brooks. It's not Tom Meehan and Mel Brooks as the producers. It's Mel Brooks as the producers.
That's right.
But Tom Meehan is the guy there, and Mel's having the ideas racing around, and Tom's the one who corrals them and focuses them and puts them.
And not every project that I work on is going to be that, but in this case, I had to be in the tank. That I had to figure out. I mean, I had to get my, as I say in the book, my radio needle onto her frequency, because she was hearing something that I wasn't hearing, and then when I moved it over. You know, you do have to kind of give yourself over to that.
All right, so when you're on her frequency, though, when do you begin to hear static, trouble? When do you begin to get that feeling that people tell me when they're working on a show that's not quite going right, there's something in the pit of your stomach that makes you uneasy?
Right, and then to recognize that thing in the pit of your stomach is that, and not just something you ate, you know? I mean, because... And it was very late in the game, because, you know, we had this, and this is what people maybe don't realize, we had this workshop reading in 2007 with Jim Sturgis and Evan Rachel Wood, and man, that thing went great. I mean, we had Marvel people there, we had investors, and they were so happy, they were glowing, because that workshop, it was killer. And so we thought, great, well, that's our script. That's done, great. The music sounded great. You know, we're in this tiny little room,
Yeah.
these huge speakers, and you know, and Bono and Edge's music playing, and Jim Sturgis delivering, you know, these songs.
Now, who's Jim Sturgis? Remind me.
He was the lead in Across the Universe.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay.
And he, you know, Julie originally wanted him to play Peter Parker.
That's when I knew you were in the tank. When Across the Universe, you went to Across the Universe, you said, I thought it was really good. All right, go on.
It was good.
And I thought, whoa, he does.
Come on. It was, you know, you go in.
Tamorized.
You go with no expectations. You go on to the web, and there are people who will say about Across the Universe, not just, oh, I love that movie. It's my favorite movie of all time. I have watched it 35 times.
Michael Cole.
Thousands of people.
Well, we digress, so I'm sorry.
Soon after that, we did a flying workshop in Los Angeles, which was, oh my gosh, all this stuff that we've thought up in our heads, are we really going to be able to do any of it? And we did this flying workshop at the old MGM studios, and this stuff is great. Everyone's flying around. We got this loom working, and it's amazing.
The loom is amazing.
The loom is amazing.
That's amazing.
And, you know, all this stuff that we thought, how is this going to work? So it was yet more confirmation that we weren't crazy. And then, and up through the first rehearsals, which were in the summer of 2010, when we were just again in a room, and I would be, you know, reading these stage directions, you know, and that's the thing, going back to 2007 in the workshop, I read the stage directions. I described all these things and how they were going to work beautifully. and you could be in your chair, you know, listening and think, oh yeah, that's going to be amazing. It's going to be amazing. And it wasn't really until we actually had to put that part of it into this world of reality, of hardware and wires and everything, and a $1 million web net. Oh, it doesn't work? That was our ending.
Now, I want to interject a statement that you make 3 times in the book. Turn On the Dark wasn't a show. It was a machine built by the gods to teach humility.
Yeah.
Now go on.
Well, exactly. You know, you can live in dreams, you know, and then at a certain point, at the
Michael Riedel comes a-calling.
At a certain point, yeah, like, what the hell? Where did this guy come from? He's not real. He can't be real. No one's really like that.
But if there hadn't been a Michael Riedel, not to take it away from you, darling, you would have had to, someone else would have, I mean, others
not with the same glee.
I don't think so.
All right,
I don't think so. Hey, man, there was plenty of room, but all that happened was you had Michael, and then Pat Healy of the Times jumped on board. Yeah. And it was just the 2 of you. I was saying this to somebody earlier. It wasn't like 600 reporters reporting on what was going on.
No, it was just the 2.
It was 2 reporters and 600 other reporters.
Following us.
Yeah, and you know, and so somebody else could have come in and actually gotten a slightly more nuanced.
But the show
That's not what I specialize in, Glenn.
No, but exactly. But somebody could have realized that and said, "Oh,
it's magic thinking on all your parts." But the show still would have been a mess.
Yes.
Yes, and then, but
so to answer your question, it wasn't until we got into tech that the first little inklings that, oh, that thing that we had in our heads, it doesn't quite look like that on the stage. But I mean, we'll fix it, surely. Surely we'll fix it. It doesn't look like it right now. But, you know, knowing anyone who goes through tech knows that there is it's a rocky road, and your show that you had
is gone. You lose it.
Goes away for a while, right? Yeah. So, being experienced in theater, even then, you're not really thinking we're in trouble.
Right.
And even with the first previews, you know, you're thinking, well, great, that was rocky. We knew we weren't going to be ready, but we'll fix it. It wasn't until, honestly, it wasn't until late December, after we'd gone through about 3 weeks of previews, that it was like, all right, well, we fixed everything we knew we had to fix. And
it's still not fixed.
And we're here. Okay.
With an opening night looming.
Now, to me, the most compelling part of this book, because it's really a wonderful read, even if you don't know anything about Spider-Man and haven't seen it. It's a terrific book about artistic egos dealing with this show, which seemed cursed. It really seemed, I mean, again, there's a list of people who, the producer died, and then it goes
Yeah,
on and on.
that was.
But the most interesting thing is your relationship with the brilliant, genius director, Julie Taymor, who now has been given carte blanche and is doing lots of things that other people don't think work. And as I mentioned before, you were smitten with her, and then there reaches a point where she starts to wreak anger at you. There's a notable scene where she just goes, lays into you. You very vividly describe, attack dogs of hell or something like that, and you are very upset. It changes something. Talk about that. What happened there?
No, that's correct. Because when I look back on it, even when we're still working on it, but now it was May, and the new team had come on and all the rest of it, and I was thinking, how we were in this working relationship for years. Mm-hmm. How did we get here, and how did we get here so fast? And what was the moment? And that was the moment, because at the end of the day, the relationship is predicated on mutual trust.
And what happened?
And I think what happened, and I didn't even really put it together until it was May, and I think what happened was, I'm a writer. I've been a writer all my life, and really at that point, in that theater, there was only one professional writer. Julie's a storyteller, but she's not a writer. And so at that moment, all those other moments aside, when we're working together on the writing and all the rest of it, at the moment of truth, when I needed people to look to me for the answers, at that moment, when I needed most of all for the collaborators, and the one in particular, to say, what
we trust
what
you.
do we do? Yeah. That moment was exploded. Instead, she basically, she said, "I don't want to listen to you. You don't know what you're talking about," and kind of, basically.
Well, you describe it as more vivid than that.
The bird. Well, it was. The yelling, whatever, yelling. I don't care about that. It was what was underneath, which was a sense of, at this moment, I'm the professional iceberg watcher, and I'm telling the captain of the ship, this is an iceberg, and not only she's not only the captain of the ship, she's also my co-professional iceberg watcher, and she basically said, no. I know that you're a professional iceberg watcher. You're mistaken. That isn't an iceberg. And if you mention icebergs again, I'm going to lock you in the brig.
You're describing a woman who goes into a rage. Then we flash forward, and many would say you betrayed her. Something so dramatic happens, and you have it in this book, that you feel free down the line, that you can get involved with this plan to oust her.
Well, but but that wasn't the plan. To carry on with the metaphor, actually, mention icebergs again, and I'm going to put you in the brig.
Yeah.
Lock you in the brig. Now, if you're in the brig, then the ship's going to go down. You can't help. You can't save everybody on the ship. You can't save yourself.
You're the first to drown because you're down below.
Yeah, man. We all saw Titanic. And you can't even save. And you can't even save the captain. You can't save anybody if you're locked in the brig. So what do you do at that point? You avoid the brig so that you can convince other people. Because at that point, all right, well, I can't get through to her, but there are other people who will and can. Surely Bono and Edge and Michael Cole, people who are, maybe have a little more clout. And so really the idea was to just, do you guys see that iceberg? Do you see it? Can we all get in a room and talk about steering away from it?
Will you come back next week? We haven't got any.
Because we haven't hit the iceberg yet.
We haven't
but we're
hit
closing
the iceberg
in.
Looming
all right.
in the
All right.
larger
Iceberg
and larger
looms
iceberg.
for Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark.
Stay tuned.
Glenn is in the brig. Will he be able to get out? Join us next week for part 2 of the Song of Spider-Man. Thanks a lot, Glenn. We'll see you next week.
pleasure.
All right.
And at first, Michael Riedel's articles were just a nuisance, like a gnat flitting around your face while you're trying to have a conversation. But as November progressed, as his articles started getting more sadistic, he was less gnat and more mosquito, taking sips of blood and leaving behind a wheel that itched like hell. By the end of 2010, when his articles were doing some serious damage, he wasn't just a blood-sucking mosquito. He was a parasite-carrying blood-sucking mosquito, depositing the larvae of an elephantiasis-causing filarial worm under the skin of our show. Not to put Riedel in a negative light or anything. You can sign up for viewer updates at theatertalk.org.
Or you can follow us on Twitter. Our thanks to the Friends of Theater Talk for their significant contribution to this production. Theater Talk is made possible in part by the Frederick Lowe Foundation, the Eleanor Naylor Dana Charitable Trust, the Corey and Bob Donnelly Charitable Fund, the Noel Coward Foundation, Carrie J. Fries, the Dorothy Strelson Foundation, the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs, and the New York State Council on the Arts, a state agency.
We welcome your questions or comments for Theater Talk. Thank you and good night.